Okay, so this is the first module after your prelim exam. So first module for the midterm. So multi-line definitions of function. So sometimes the physical or economic situation behaves depending on circumstances, and the more complicated function may be needed to describe the situation. So, for example, for the sales tax, so some states have different rates of sales tax depending on the type of item purchased. So, a luxury item may be taxed at 12%, food may have no tax, and all other items may have a 6% tax. So, yan, iba't ibang tax. So, we could describe the situation by using a multi-line function, which is a function whose defining rule consists of several pieces. Kumbaga, isang aspect lang yung dinidescribe niya pero may iba't ibang rules. So which piece of the rule we need to use will depend on what we buy. Yan. So in this example, we could define the tax T on an item which costs X to be. T of X equals to 0 if X is the cost of a food. 0.12x if X is the cost of a luxury item. If X, 0.06 naman if the cost of any other item. So, kumbaga, itong rule na to, dito siya galing sa problem or sa na-state kanina. So, 0 kasi nga yung food, no tax. And then, kung luxury item, so it will be taxed 12%. So, that's 12%. So, 12 divided by 100, that's 0.12. And then, kung any other items yan, so 6% yung tax. So, kaya 0.06x yan dyan. So, for example, to find the tax on a $2 can of stew, so stew is a food, so that means we will use the first line of the rule, then we can find that the tax is 0. Kasi nga, 0 yung tax, basta food. To find the tax on a $30 pair of earrings naman, so earrings are considered as luxury item. So 12% yung tax niya. So 30 times 0.12, you'll get 3.60 or $3.6 yung kanyang tax. Then the tax on a $20 book requires using the third rule. Kasi nga yung book is not a food and is not a luxury item. So dito siya sa any other item. So yung tax niya is 0.06. So times 20, so you'll get $1.20. So yun yung tax niya. Okay, next we have the wind chill index. So the rate at which a person's body loses heat depends on the temperature of the surrounding air and on the speed of the air. So dalawang factors. So you lose heat more quickly on a windy day than you do on a day with little or no wind. So di ba mas madali tayong manlamig if ever malakas yung hangin. Scientists have experimentally determined this rate of heat loss as a function of temperature and wind speed. And the resulting function is called the wind chill index or the WCI. So this WCI is the temperature on a still day or no wind at which your body would lose heat at the same rate as on the windy day. So for example, the WCI value for 30 degree Fahrenheit air moving at 15 miles per hour is 9 degree Fahrenheit. So your body loses heat as quickly on a 30 degree Fahrenheit day with a 15 miles per hour wind as it does on a 9 degree Fahrenheit day with no wind. So same lang if ever kung may wind or wala. So same lang yung rate ng pag-lose ng body natin ng heat. So upon their experimentation, so nagkabuo sila ng ganitong rules. So WCI is equal to T or just the temperature if the velocity, the speed of the wind is greater than or equal to 0 but less than or equal to 4. And then ito naman yung formula sa pagkuha ng WCI if ever the speed of the wind is greater than or equal to 4 but less than or equal to 45. And then ito naman yung formula sa pagkuha ng WCI if ever the speed of the wind is greater than 45. Yan. Okay? So, if ever naman, kasi nakita natin kanina or nabasa natin kanina na yung WCI is being affected by two variables. So, the temperature and the wind speed. However, if the temperature is constant, kumbaga same lang yung temperature, then the resulting formula for the WCI will only depend on the speed of the wind. Kumbaga kung hindi nagbabago yung temperature, so surely yung WCI is dependent only on the speed of the wind. So if the air temperature is 30 degree Fahrenheit, so kung nag-change yung temperature natin, then the formula for the WCI is, so kumbaga dito, yung T natin naging 30 na. So yan, naging 30 na siya. So ito naman, galing yan dito pa rin. Okay, sa first na formula. So dito, our T is 30. So 91.5 minus 30, that is 61.5. Divided by 22. So kung ano yung sagot dyan, i-multiply sa tatlong nandito na numbers. Okay? So kung ano yung sagot sa pag-multiply dito, isa-subtract siya kay 91.4. So sa pag-subtract nyo yan, you will get 62.19. And then pag-multiply naman sa dalawang ito dito, so ito yung magiging sagot, 18.70 and 1.25. So as what you can observe here, nag-change yung signs nila. Kasi nga, dito, negative times positive, that is negative. Negative times negative, that is positive. So kaya negative at saka positive. Dito naman, sa third line, so 1.60 times 30, that is 48. Minus 55, that becomes negative 7. So kaya negative 7 ang nandito. And then dito naman sa right side, dito kay figure 1, this is the graph of the WCI for the temperatures of 40 degree Fahrenheit, 30 degree Fahrenheit, and 20 degree Fahrenheit. So yan. Okay, so if you want to practice, so may practice problem tayo dito. Yan. Next is we have define f of x. So multi-line function pa rin. So our if x is less than 0, the answer is 2. If x is greater than or equal to 0 but less than 2, you'll use 2x. If x naman is greater than 2, the answer directly is 1. Now, we need to evaluate f of negative 3, f of 0, f of 1, f of 4, and f of 2. So, dito, so evaluate daw natin una si f of negative 3. So, negative 3, we need to identify saang rule siya. First line ba, second line, or third line. So, saan siya na-belong na range. So, we all know that negative 3 is less than 0. So, kumbaga, we will use the first line. So, kung nasa first line daw, the answer diretso is 2. So, f of negative 3 is 2. Dito naman sa second na need natin evaluate, we have f of 0 and f of 1. So si 0 at saka 1, nasa second line sila na range. Kasi nga, they are in the range of 0 and 2. So between yan na values dyan. Okay, so we need to use 2x. So first, let's solve for f of 0. So 2 times 0, that's 0. And then next is 1. So 2 times 1, that is 2. Next is we have f of 4. So itong si 4, we all know that this is greater than 2. So dito siya na-belong sa third line kasi x greater than 2. And then ang rule niya is 1 yung sagot. So at x equals to 4, f of 4 now is equal to 1. Next, the last is f of 2. So si f of 2, sa napapansin natin dito, wala siya sa range dito. Kasi nga dito, less than 0. Ito naman, greater than or equal to 0 but less than 2. Dito naman, greater than 2. So wala talagang exactly 2 kasi x equals to 2. So none of the line applies. So we can say that x equals to 2 is undefined. So undefined yan siya kasi wala siya dito sa rule. Wala tayong magagamit na any rule. So the graph of this function f of x is given here sa right side. Note that the whole above x equals to 2, since f of 2 is not defined by this rule for f. Yan. 2, 2. So naka-whole siya kasi hindi siya defined. Undefined siya. So if you want to practice, so may practice problems tayo dito. Then we can now think of a multi-line function definition as a machine which first examines the input value to define or decide which line of the function rule to apply. So kumbaga, um, atin mo nang i-define yung given and then i-decide, we can now decide after natin ma-describe yung given, we can now decide kung ano yung line of the function ang dapat natin gamitin. So ganito siya, so input, and then you decide which line of the rule apply. So kung first line, then you'll get the output. Kung second line, get the output. And then last line, get the output. Yan. Next, we have compositions of functions or functions of functions. So I know you're familiar with this one since you have already done this way back high school pa. Okay, so kumbaga functions of a function. So kumbaga may function sa loob ng function. And then we are to solve kung ano yung nasa loob. For example, dito, f of g of x. So we need to solve first for g of x and then solve that for f of x. Kung ganito naman siya, kung kabaliktaran naman siya, kung g of f of x, so solve first for f of x and then solve for g of x. Yan. Okay, so para siyang machine. So x will go to machine g, so to get g of x. So yung g of x naman na sagot will go to machine f, then you'll get f of g of x. So we have x here, pupunta siya kay f. And then makukuha natin si f of x. So papasok naman siya sa machine g. So kukuha natin si g of f of x. So yan, yung composition of function. So for example, f of x equals to square root of x minus 2. G of x naman is equal to x squared. And h of x is 3x if x is less than 2. H of x is x minus 1 if x is greater than or equal to 2. So evaluate f of g of 3, g of f of 6, f of h of 2, and h of g of negative 3. So find the equations and domains of f of g of x and g of x. G of f of x. So first daw natin na isolve is itong si f of g of 3. So solve first for g of 3. So here for g of 3, so the value of our g of x is x squared. So our x is 3. So 3 squared, that becomes 9. Okay, next is solve for f of 9. So f, yung equation niya is square root of x minus 2. Yan. So yung x natin dito is 9. So 9 minus 2, that is 7. So our answer is square root of 7. So now, square root of 7 is approximately 2.646. Next, we have g of f of 6. So solve first for f of 6. So we have our f of x is square root of x minus 2. So yung x natin is 6. So 6 minus 2, that is 4. Square root of 4, that is 2. Now solve for g of 2. So yung g of x natin is x squared. So we have 2 squared. So the answer is 4. Then f of h of 2. So dito kay h of x, we need to decide saan siya. First line or second line. So 2, dito siya na belong. X is greater than or equal to 2 sa second line, x minus 1. So x minus 1, so our x is 2. So 2 minus 1, that is 1. Then f. So ang equation ni f is this one, square root of x minus 2. So we have square root of 1 minus 2, that is negative 1. So we'll get square root of negative 1. So square root of negative 1 is undefined since this is an imaginary number. Next, we have h of g of negative 3. So h of g of negative 3. So our g of x is x squared. So we have negative 3 squared, that is 9. So h. So saan na belong si 9? Sa first line or sa second line? So dito siya na belong sa second line. X is greater than or equal to 2. So x minus 1 pa rin. So 9 minus 1. So that is 8. So this is now the answer. For the next naman, we need to find the equations and domains of this one, f of g of x and g of f of x. So for f of g of x, solve first for g of x. So substitute, this is x squared. So dyan si g of x. And then for f naman, f of x, so square root of x minus 2. Ang value ng ating x dito is x squared. So we have square root of x squared minus 2. So now the domain of this one is, it should be that x squared minus 2 should be greater than or equal to 0. Kasi nga, kapag negative yung sagot dito, then magiging undefined yung ating sagot. Kagaya dito kay negative 1. For g of f of x naman, so f of x first, so that is square root of x minus 2. For g, that is yung ano ni g of x is x squared. So ito, x squared. So here, we have x minus 2 squared. So matatanggal na yung square root na yan dyan since magiging 1 na yan yung power niya. So x minus 2. Now, to find the domain, so dun pa rin tayo balik sa square root. So kasi dapat yung square root na to, dapat hindi siya maging negative. So the domain of our g of x is all x greater than or equal to 2. So dapat yan siya. Okay? Next, we have shifting and stretching of graph. So some compositions are relatively common and easy. And you should recognize the effect of the composition on the graphs of the function. So here, nasa right natin, si figure 6 is the graph of y equals to f of x. So i-graph down natin si 2 plus f of x, 3 times f of x, and c f times x minus, f of x minus 1. Yan. So first is the graph 2 plus f of x. So kung 2 plus f of x na yan, if you are to make a table and then use the numbers from negative 2 to positive 2 or negative 5 to positive 2 or negative 5 to positive 5, then you see, ito yung magiging graph niya. Yan. So, nag-shift siya. The graph rigidly shapes the graph of f of x 2 units upward. So, yung graph ni f of x, nag-shift siya 2 units upward. So, from negative 1 na value ng ating y, naging 1 siya. From 1 na value ng ating 1, naging 2 siya, naging 3 siya. And then here, this is still 1, so 3. Yung 2 na value ng ating y, naging 4 siya kasi nga 2 units upward siya. So ito yung mangyayari. And then next is to graph 3 times f of x. So ito naman, it is very clear na kumbaga multiple of 3 dapat yung pag-shift ng graph. So we can see here that the graph will be stretched vertically by a factor of 3 kasi minimultiply siya by 3. So ito yung magiging sagot niya, yung yellow-green na line. So instead na negative 1, so dapat multiple siya ng 3. So negative 1 times 3, that's negative 3. 0 times 3, that is still 0. Here, 1 times 3, magiging 3. Here, this is still 1 times 3. So 2. 2 times 3, that becomes 6. Here is 0, so 0 pa rin. Itong value na dito is negative 1 yan dyan. Negative 1 times 3, that is negative 3. So balik siya. Next is the graph of f of x minus 1. Yan. So dito sa nakikita natin, this will shift 1 units to the right. So sa x naman tayo mag-change. So instead na negative 1 yung value ni x, magiging 0. So nandito na siya. Instead na 1 yung value ni x. So instead na 1 yung value ni x, naging 2. So from here, naging 2 na yan. And then yung value naman na 3, naging 4 na yan. So yan, dyan. Yung value na 4, naging 5 na yan. Yan. So nag-shift siya 1 unit to the right. So ito pala yung rules niya dito. Okay, so if the graph of k plus f of x will be the graph of this one, f of x shifted by k units, rigidly shifted up by k units. And then kung ito naman, vertically stretched by a factor of k, kung ano yung number na minumultiply sa kanila. And then kung subtraction dito, shifted right. Kung addition naman dito, shifted left. Yan. So if you want to practice, then we have another practice problem here. Next, we have the iteration of functions. So if we say iteration, this is the continuous, kumbaga repeated na process. So pabalik-balik yung process. So here, for example, suppose the function is 5 over x plus x over 2. And we start with the input x equals to 4. So given yan. So what happens? So first natin na iteration, our input is 4. So 5 over 4 plus 4 over 2, that is 2.65. So itong output na to, ito na yung magiging input natin for the second iteration. So kaya naging ganito na siya. So ito yung sagot. This will be now our input for the third iteration. Then ito na yung sagot. This will become the element for the fourth iteration. Ito na yung sagot. This will become fifth iteration. Ito na yung sagot. So sa nakikita nyo dito, medyo di malayo yung difference nila. And then upon performing the sixth iteration, nakita na same lang yung sagot sa fifth at saka sa sixth iteration. So that means you can now stop the iteration. Kasi nga, no matter how many iterations you will do, same pa rin yung sagot. Yan, that's for the iteration. Yan. So here is another practice problem. And then we have the absolute value and the greatest integer. So if we say absolute value, this is the distance of that number from 0. So if we say distance, walang negative. So if we say square absolute value of 5, absolute value of negative 5. So ilang units yung distance niya from 0? So that's 5. Absolute value of positive 5 is still 5. So review lang dito. May mga rules yan dyan. Yan. So we also have the graphs here, shifting of the graph. So same pa rin yung rule niya kanina, pag-shift ng ating graphs. And then we have the greatest integer function or the int x. So if we say greatest integer function, this is the integer na less than the given. For example, greatest integer of 3.2 is 3. Greatest integer of 3.9 is 3, not 4. Kasi it should be less than sa kanya. And then the greatest integer of 3 is 3. Less than or equal sa kanya. Pero kung negative naman, iba yung rule niya. So we need to know na kung negative number, so pa-left yung direction nila. So kumbaga, yung mas maliit sa kanya is nasa left niya. So for example, greatest integer of negative 4.2 is not negative 4 kasi mas malaki sa negative 4 kaysa kay negative 4.2. So it should be negative 5. Greatest integer of negative 4.7 is negative 5. But the greatest integer function of negative 4 is negative 4. So ito yung rule, basta negative yung number. So it should be less than sa kanya. Pero kung negative number yan, kung whole number siya, equal sa kanya dapat. So ito yung graph ng greatest integer function. This is what we call a step function. So yan. Kasi hindi pwede, hindi cover yung exact number. Yan. Dapat it should be less than sa kanya. Less than dapat kay 1, less than kay 2, less than kay 3, and any numbers. And then ito yung graph niya if you want to graph. And then we have a really whole function. Dito naman kay whole function, the answer is 2 if the given is a rational number. So if we say rational number, these are numbers that can be represented by A over B. So example, we have 3, 5 over 3, negative 2 over 5. So ang ansagot niyan is 2 kasi they are rational numbers. If ever naman, irrational yan, yung sagot is always 1. So irrational numbers, these are the numbers, kumbaga kung sa calculator, walang ending. Like the pi, square root of 7 and square root of 2. So yung sagot dyan is always 1. So pag graph niyan, ganito yung So, nandito si rational numbers, nandito si irrational numbers. Yan. So, if you want to graph, then we have also an example here sa graph. And then dito sa baba, we have some sets of problems as well as yung answers nila nandito din sa baba. If you want to practice, yan. May mga answers yan dyan.